So yeah, thank you, Adrian, for the introduction. But just to expand a little bit, I'm Helen Holder. I saw that there was some familiar names of people on the call, but for those that don't know me, I currently work as a lead business analyst within Justice Digital, which is part of the Ministry of Justice. And as Adrian said, I've been a BA for over 10 years. I'm not going to get any more precise than that because it might give some of my age away. But I have worked in mainly the public sector, and over more recent years, I've tried to be active in the BA community. So I volunteer for things like the IIBA, and also a shout out to YBA, Young Business Analysts, that I've recently started doing some work with as well. But what I am here to talk to you about today is character crafting and how behaviours can be caught, taught, and sought. And you may be thinking, what on earth is that all about? So, this was a presentation that I gave back at the BA conference in September in London last year. And when I kind of did that, the way I opened it up to give a bit of context and background and explain what this was all about was I thought it would be fun to play a game of Have You Ever? So we're going to try and do the same thing here virtually. So in a moment, I am going to describe some situations. And if you feel that you have been in that situation before, if it's something that sounds familiar, that resonates for you, I just really simply want you to give a kind of thumbs up or a heart emoji or something that just shows me that that's something that you've experienced. So if we're all ready then. So firstly, have you ever had to put forward a recommendation or perhaps a point of view that you know doesn't completely align to the point of view of your kind of senior stakeholder or project lead? So it's something where there's going to be a little bit of conflict. So many thumbs there, a sea of thumbs. Okay. Have you ever had to work on a project, a change project, or something similar where there have perhaps been people in your stakeholder group that haven't been as keen on the change that you're looking to introduce, and perhaps there's been some disruptive behaviour from one or more people in workshops that you've had to manage while still kind of getting the outcomes you need? Again, lots of thumbs there. Okay. Um, have you ever had to work across multiple work streams? So you've perhaps been sort of switching between different contexts, having to know about different policies, processes, stakeholder groups, lots of context switching. And again, I can see plenty of thumbs going up there. So those are the kind of scenarios that first got me thinking about character crafting. And they were the sorts of scenarios that I found myself struggling with and finding challenging, and not just at the beginning of my career, but actually throughout. And when I started talking to other BAs, there was plenty of people that were telling me the same things, that these were things that they often found challenging. And that could be despite the fact that they might have been a BA for years, that they might have had lots of certificates and qualifications. And so I started to think about, why that would be. What was it about these scenarios that was so challenging? And I think it's because actually those particular situations that I described, they're not really reliant on our knowledge of business analysis tools and techniques. We're not going to be rescued in those situations by our in-depth knowledge of PESTLE. And those are things that really call upon our personal skills, our human skills. And what I became interested in was, okay, if I feel that I'm not doing so well in certain areas, how can I develop those personal skills in the same way that I would try and develop my knowledge of a particular tool or technique or framework? And so, what I am going to talk through with you this evening is a kind of condensed version of some of the learning and experimentation that I did over a period of time to try and improve and build upon those personal skills. And hopefully some of it will be useful to you, but let's see. So before I get into the kind of meat of the presentation, just to touch upon some of the key terms that you will sort of hear me talking about and explain a little bit about those. So character is a term that's very much front and centre here. And what I am talking about here is this combination of personality traits, of qualities that when we combine them together, make us the unique individuals that we are. I'm also going to refer to behaviours quite a lot. Behaviours are very much linked to character, but these are the kind of outward manifestation of that character. So it's how we respond to different situations that we find ourselves in. And then later on in the presentation, I'm going to talk about persona. This is a little bit different to user research personas that you might be familiar with. What I'm talking about here is sort of an alter ego, so an imagined or an exaggerated version of a character that's perhaps different to the kind of everyday personality, the everyday character somebody displays. But first, we are going to look at competencies, conduct, and character strength. So when I first started thinking about how I could develop my personal skills as a BA, it seemed sensible to me to really make sure that I understood what it was that was expected of me in my role. So what was business analysis, really about? What were the behaviours that would make me successful? And so I started with a look at the BA competencies. What you can see on the screen is two competency models. And again, I'll just kind of ask for a bit of a thumbs up if anybody has seen either of these before. A few people. So on the left-hand side, we've got the BCS version, and this is in their business analysis handbook. We've also got the IIBA version. And whilst these look very different, they're actually, in terms of the content of them, broadly very similar. So both of the models will talk about a need for some business knowledge, some business acumen. So things like understanding how to put together a good business case, things like having some commercial awareness, some domain knowledge, and that kind of thing. There is also a reference in both to professional techniques, so things like an ability to do process modelling or requirements engineering or data modelling and so forth. But in the context of this presentation, what I am really keen to draw your attention to is the section that BCS covers under personal qualities and that the IIBA covers under behavioural characteristics, interaction skills and communication skills. So firstly, these are quite sizable sections of these models. It's worth kind of pointing that out. But also it covers things like resilience, building relationships, leadership, team working, adaptability. So all of those personal skills that I was kind of referring to earlier. What I also thought could be useful was to look at the code of conduct associated with the business analysis role. Again, there is a version by BCS and there is a version from IIBA, but again, they are really, really quite similar in their content. So I kind of looked through those and pulled out the key themes. So firstly, as BAs, we have a duty to our profession. So this is really pointing to the fact that if we are going to kind of hold this job title of business analyst, we need to kind of ensure that we are behaving reputably and we're upholding the professional standards that are associated with the role. There is then a reference to this duty to the client and to the public. So this is really pointing at, how we behave towards the organisations that employ us. And ultimately the customers that are going to be the recipients of the products and the services or whatever it is that we are delivering. And the emphasis here is very much on how we can demonstrate integrity and inclusivity. And then finally, both of them reference this need for professional competence. And this is the bit that really points to that kind of growth mindset, how we can kind of keep a focus on continuous improvement and ensure that we keep our skills and our knowledge up to date. And the final thing that I did have a look at was the BA Leadership Code, which was put together by the BA Managers Forum. So they canvassed a whole load of BA managers. And there were 5 areas that they called out, which were integrity, teamwork, empathy, professionalism, and self-improving. And I think again you can really start to see the language here is kind of referencing those personal skills, those kind of human qualities. So this was really, really useful. It gave me a really good kind of foundation and background as to what the role was about, what it was that I needed to be good at. What it didn't necessarily help me with, though, was if I did feel that I was kind of struggling in any of these areas, how would I go about building those skills up? There wasn't sort of a quick or easy course that I could go and do. And so I did what we all do, and I turned to the World Wide Web and I did a bit of an internet search. And nowadays, perhaps you could kind of write a neat little ChatGPT prompt to get you some information as well. But one of the pages that came back was this one called the VIA Institute on Character. And when I had a look into this, I found some really interesting stuff. So just to give a little bit of background. So back in the kind of early 2000s, there was a group of scientists that wanted to spend some time looking a little bit more seriously at this concept of character and personality. And so there was about kind of 55 different scientists that worked within the study over a period of about 4 years. And at the end of that, they developed this set of 24 character strengths that you can see on the screen at the moment. And these, they said, represented the positive aspects of the human character. Now, the good news for me and for all of you out there is that we all possess all 24 of these. So, we can all give ourselves a bit of a pat on the back for that. The thing that kind of creates our own unique personality profiles is the kind of level to which we possess each one. That will be different for all of us. Now, there were 2 things that kind of stood out for me when I saw this. The first one was the fact that actually this was quite similar in a lot of the language that I was looking at. So the reference to things like leadership and teamwork and love of learning to some of what I had seen in the competencies and in the codes of conduct. So there were some real similarities there. But what I found even more interesting was this idea that it spoke about on this site, which was that the level to which we possess each of these strengths isn't fixed. It is something that we can change, that we can dial up through practice and through what they called guided practice. So we will have a little bit of a dig into that in a moment, but I just want to reflect now on this statement, that first part of the statement in the title, that behaviours can be caught. So what I mean by this is that if we understand as business analysts, or to be fair, any profession out there, if you understand the competencies, the sort of personal skills that are associated with your role, and the codes of conduct that sit around it, then it allows you firstly to seek out appropriate role models. So people that are already out there in your community, working in your profession, that are already embodying and enacting these kind of behaviours. And then as we, as individuals, begin to take on those behaviours ourselves, it actually allows us, secondly, to become the role models to others. And in doing that, and that kind of passing on of behaviours through role models, that's what I'm really pointing to when I say that behaviours can be caught. And I did see a line recently that said that culture is behaviour at scale. And I think actually, if we all stop and reflect on how the way we behave can really influence the environment around us, that's something I think that's really quite key for us to consider. So, having found the character strengths framework, I decided that that was what I wanted to work with moving forwards. I liked the fact that it had like familiarity with the competencies and with the code of conduct. But I did also like the fact that it was perhaps a little bit broader as well. So for me, this wasn't just an exercise about being a better BA. It was actually also about being a better person. So I did like the fact that it kind of went a little bit beyond just the BA competencies, if you will. And so the next step for me really was to figure out, in terms of each of those character strengths, what level did I possess each one of those? And the approach that I decided to take was this strengths inventory. Now, this was something that I actually did a couple of times in different ways. The first time, though, it was very kind of gut instinct, finger in the air exercise. And I simply drew out 3 circles. So similar to what you can see on the screen now. In the centre circle, the green circle, I placed what I termed to be my leading strengths. Now, these are things that I felt quite passionate about, things that that really resonated with me, that I felt were important, and equally things that I felt I could quite easily evidence, so things that I could do without kind of worrying about too much. And the example that I drew out when I presented this at the conference was the strength around love of learning. So I fessed up at that conference that I am a little bit of a BA nerd. I quite like reading a textbook. I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but I quite enjoy a textbook. And I also am always the first person to stick my hand up if there's any kind of training course going at work. So I definitely thought that that love of learning was one that was a strength for me. In the second circle, I placed then what I called my intermediate strengths. So again, still things that I felt quite comfortable with, still things that I felt I had a fair amount of evidence around. But if I was entirely honest, these were things that didn't come as second nature and that I did have to put that kind of additional bit of effort and thought into. And again, the example that I often pull out here is around honesty. And that's not because I kind of have any kind of major problems with telling the truth. But I think we've all found ourselves in those kind of scenarios. So for example, maybe giving feedback to a colleague that's not going to be entirely positive. Those conversations can be uncomfortable. And honesty sometimes can be uncomfortable. And we have to think about how we deliver those messages. It can be all too easy to just think, I'll just say the nice stuff and I'll leave the rest. So honesty was something I felt I was quite good at, but as I say, I did really have to kind of put some thought into it. And then in the final circle, the red circle, that was where I placed my lesser strengths. Now, I don't use the term weakness because this isn't that I didn't have these strengths at all. It was really about how I felt about these things. These were areas that I didn't feel confident in, things that I struggled to recognize in myself, areas where I really felt an undue level of anxiety around them. So, an example that I pulled out there was around perspective. I am, like I'm sure there are many of you on this call, a classic overthinker. So if anybody was to give me feedback on a piece of my work that was, perhaps a sort of constructive criticism, I would immediately kind of really dwell on the negative aspect of that and think it was all rubbish. If I was working on a project that was maybe not going quite as well as it could have, I would really kind of internalize some of that and it would really impact the way that I was engaging with my work, with my colleagues, and not really the space that I wanted to be in. Now, I mentioned that I did this exercise a few different times. So as I learned a little bit more, around kind of self-development, I found out about strength spotting. So down the line, I actually revisited the inventory, having kind of used some of these strength spotting techniques that you can see on the screen in front of you. Now, I'm not professing to be an expert in this. So this is not an exhaustive list of strength spotting techniques, but these are some of the ones that I've used and found useful. And I'm going to maybe just talk to a couple of them. So firstly, quite a nice, easy one to do is simply to think about what are the activities, the tasks that you do that give you energy. What things do you enjoy? Perhaps you find them slightly easier than other things, so you get kind of a bit more pleasure out of them for that reason. Those are the types of things that can kind of point you towards some of your leading strengths. And then conversely, if you think about what drains your energy, so the things that you sort of, roll out of bed on a morning and go off to work and think, oh, not that. If you think about that, that can be the thing that points you towards some of your lesser strengths. Linked to that, and something I definitely did early on in my kind of journey was to do some journaling. So actually writing down, particularly in those moments where I either felt very high energy or very low energy, writing a little bit more detail about what was happening in those moments to try and help me kind of really pick out what was going on was really useful. So definitely recommend journaling. And then a final technique that might be useful is if you kind of had an imaginary mentor. So this is kind of a bit of a play on the missing person technique. So if you imagined that you were working with another BA or you had a BA mentor, what would be the skills and attributes you would want them to have so that they could help you? Because again, that can kind of help you think about the skills that you want to develop. So when I did this at the conference, I kind of asked people to do a little mini exercise. Now, I'm not obviously going to be able to do that because we're virtual today. So what I'm going to do instead, I'm sure you'll be delighted to hear, is to give you some homework. You can thank me later. But this exercise is really about your opportunity to create your own inventory. And it's very simply kind of to just do what you've just seen me talk about on the screen. So to draw out those three circles, to think about where you would place each of those character strengths in terms of the leading, intermediate, or lesser, and to kind of plot them onto that. In a moment, I'll put back up the 24 character strengths, and I've highlighted five that I kind of called out at the conference as ones that I thought were definitely relevant to the BA role. I definitely encourage you guys in the chat maybe to think about any others that you kind of particularly reflect are important to business analysis, and equally to kind of reach out to me after this event and share with me any thoughts that you'd got. And then finally, I think when you're doing this exercise, I definitely encourage you to take some time to reflect. So by all means, you might want to do a quick version of this, just like I did, straight after this presentation, while it's fresh in your mind. But actually taking some time to use those strength spotting techniques is really valuable. And actually sometimes seeing how you shift things around after time, after you've sort of sat and thought about them for a little bit, can also be quite interesting. So there's some homework for you. So as I said, here are the character strengths. So the ones that I kind of picked out when I did this last September were curiosity, bravery. I definitely think we need some bravery as BAs. Social intelligence in terms of how we interact with people, leadership and teamwork. But I am fairly sure, having looked at this several times, that there's plenty more on there that are relevant to what we do. So I had done my strengths inventory. I had decided where each of my different strengths were sitting. The next thing was to think about how I was going to build upon those strengths, how I was going to either maintain them or to build the ones that were in that kind of lesser strength category. And so the approach that I chose to take was this one that you can see on the screen here, something that I called the character passport. And I'll fess up straight away on this and say this was something that I kind of pinched from my kids. So they came home from school one day armed with a letter and a list of activities. And it was 36 things to do before you're 6 3/4, which I thought was quite intriguing. And as I read the letter that their school had sent back, I learned that this was something to do with their school's character curriculum. And when I looked into this a little bit more, what I found out was that there's this thing called character education. It's a very big thing across a number of different educational institutions. And this list of activities was about helping to prepare the children in the school in developing sort of social intelligence, in building their confidence, in building their emotional intelligence, in a way that would help them to ensure that they were successful not only in academic terms, but also really in terms of how they kind of integrated with the environment around them, so the communities that they were part of. And I absolutely loved it because I thought that was exactly what I had been looking for in my own journey. It was like a way to develop these skills that just kind of make being human that bit easier. And so, as I say, I stole with pride and I created this list of 24 things to do in 2024. And I split it into three categories. So there was a category that was very much just focused on me developing myself. Then it was kind of a layer out, and it was about activities that I might do that might also allow me to kind of help and support other people. And then I guess another layer out, which was things that might actually have a slightly wider impact in the environment around me. And these were all kind of things that were based on the strengths inventory. So you'll remember me talking about my challenges around perspective. So one of the activities that is on here was to introduce a daily gratitude diary. So for the whole year last year, every day I wrote down 3 things that I was grateful for, 3 positive things from each day, in a bid to try and kind of get my kind of thinking moving, shifting towards a little bit more of a positive perspective. There was also things on here where I wanted to develop my bravery, so things about presenting to groups of people, such as your good selves. Now, when I was presenting this at the conference, we hadn't quite got to the end of the year. You'll see that now I've kind of come to the end of 2024, and this red, amber, green status then is kind of where I got to. And I won't be too shy to admit that there are a couple of red things on there, things that I didn't do. And I think that's absolutely fine. The whole intent of the character passport was to just kind of to push me forwards, to give me some motivation to try different things. So I'm perfectly comfortable with the fact I didn't do all of it. And this for me is a kind of work in progress. It's something that I can continue with. So if you do feel like doing this yourself, I would definitely say don't get too hung up on on whether you complete all of it or not. It's actually kind of just setting that intention that's really important. So behaviours can be taught. What do we mean by this? I have certainly been guilty in the past of saying things like, oh yeah, you can teach somebody how to do process modelling, but you can't teach them how to be good with people. And I think there's a tendency for us to think of personality and character as being this fixed thing, this kind of immovable object. And people are the way that they are. And what I was starting to learn about in looking at kind of character education was that wasn't entirely true. And so if you were to think about the kind of character strengths, those 24 character strengths as our curriculum, and then if we kind of put forward that character passport, that set of activities, and think of that as a lesson plan, then actually it's not unreasonable to think that behaviours can actually be taught. I will point out here, because I didn't do it earlier, you'll see this little icon with a stack of books at the bottom. On the slides, there are some books that I read throughout my journey that I found really, really useful and fantastically interesting. So, if you get a chance to look back over, I would definitely recommend some of these as further reading as well. So then, character crafting. So I had when I was looking at this, as I say, subject, this character education, one of the things that came up really, really frequently was this quote, which is, "We are what we frequently do." And it points to a really cool concept around character crafting and character education, which is that this is about learning through doing. The personal skills, the human skills that we're talking about here are not easily gained through just reading a book or through sitting in a classroom. Ultimately, you have to kind of get out there and do something. And so the character passport approach that I set kind of enabled me to do this in two key ways. The first was in relation to habits. So it was about doing things with kind of regularity, with consistency, and really kind of trying to rewire my brain. So I've already given one example of this, the daily gratitude diary that I talked about. That was an example of habit forming. But another example was around sort of persistence. So I'd kind of put that in my lesser strengths. I'd recognize that a bit more often than I would have liked, I was maybe giving up on stuff or procrastinating in getting things done. So one of the activities I set for myself was around doing some more regular physical exercise throughout the week. I'm not a big fan of physical exercise, I'll be honest. So this was quite a challenge for me in terms of that kind of perseverance. And very, very simply, I used a really simple tracking method that you can see on the screen at the moment. Every day where I did the amount of exercise I'd set for myself, I coloured in a box and that was great. And I could very quickly see where I'd done very well. Started off quite nicely in January, gave myself a big pat on the back. But I could also very quickly see where it started to go wrong. So by February, you may notice that my perseverance had already started to wane. And that's where habit stacking came in. So you can check if you were paying attention. So for those of you that were listening, you'd have heard me say about my love of learning and how that's one of my leading strengths. So one of the other activities that I'd set around maintaining that love of learning was to listen to audiobooks, to listen to some more books. And what I decided to do was to set myself the condition that I would only allow myself to listen to the audiobooks when I went out for a walk. So that basically, and that's really what habit stacking is about. It is about taking an activity that you're not that keen on and combining it with something that you're far more motivated to do. Because what I immediately saw is because I was really keen to go out and to listen to the books, I was far more likely to go out and do that walk. It really was what kind of motivated me to kind of get up off the sofa and get out there and do some exercise. The other type of activity then is templating. Now, I will point out that I am not a psychologist. So some of the terms that I use are not kind of scientific in nature. But just to kind of explain it in my own language, when we find ourselves in different situations, there is a part of our brain that kind of acts like a bit of a filing cabinet. So it has a little bit of a look through and it tries to see if we have previously found ourselves in a similar scenario. And it does that so that we've got a shortcut to figuring out how we should respond, what are the things that we should do in that situation. And it can be incredibly useful if we have previously had a similar experience, and that has been a positive one. That can be a really useful tool that our brain offers up. It's not so useful though if we've either previously been in this situation and had a very negative experience, or if we've actually never been in that kind of scenario before. Because what's likely to happen in those two situations is that we're going to be thrown into a kind of fight, flight, or freeze situation. And that we're probably going to get really anxious, maybe even get quite emotional. Certainly our behaviours are not going to be ideal, and the outcomes that we're going to experience are probably not going to be what we would want them to be. And so templating then is really about consciously and proactively creating kind of practice scenarios for yourself. So you're creating that kind of mental model, that reference material for yourself. So as an example, when I found out that I had been accepted to speak at the conference last year, I knew I had never done anything like that before. I had never stood up in a room full of people and talked about anything. And so, apart from sort of workshop facilitation, but I had never done that kind of big presentation. And so what I wanted to make sure was that my brain had some positive reference models that it could call up, and I wasn't going to stand up in front of a room full of people and go completely blank. And so I did things like I did smaller presentations at work. I did some other kind of smaller conferences where I could do sort of mini talks on other subjects, just to get me used to standing up and talking in front of other people. I also did the presentation a few times in virtual settings as well, so that by the time it came to the actual day itself, my brain had already got that reference material. And whilst I was still nervous, I'm still nervous today, it was a manageable level of nerves. So, some tips. So when you are looking at creating your own activities, make sure that you don't just kind of pick out things that focus on your lesser strengths. Get a good spread across each of the different categories. It's good to make sure you maintain different strengths, and it also gives you the opportunity to kind of lean into that habit stacking that I mentioned. Do think about how you will track your progress. A really simple tracking technique is fine, but it helps you to see where you're on track and to kind of keep you motivated and give yourself that kind of pat on the back. But it also shows really quickly where you're going a little bit sort of off-piste, and you can kind of course correct and bring yourself back. And then finally, I guess take small steps, start small. If you want to practice being braver, it doesn't mean that you've got to jump straight into a situation where you're presenting at a conference. It could just be that actually the next time that you're on a webinar, you're going to be more active in a chat bar. It could be that in your team meeting, you're going to speak more than you normally do. So it doesn't have to be huge. So I'm going to talk now then about personas. So personas or alter egos are things that a number of different kind of personalities out there use. And they use these as a way to help them with stage fright, or perhaps just to bring out a particular element in their performance. So to kind of bring a bit of colour to this and sort of explain a bit more what I'm talking about, I thought it'd be useful to share some examples. So Beyonce, she very famously had an alter ego called Sasha Fierce. So obviously as Beyonce, she's expected to come out on stage, do these big, bold diva performances, wear these sexy outfits. And that was actually quite at odds particularly at the beginning of her career, with the sort of quieter and more conservative side to her personality, sort of in her personal life. So the character of Sasha Fierce helped her to kind of lean into that other side of her performance and her onstage persona. Kobe Bryant, the sort of famous basketball player, he created an alter ego called Black Mamba. He used that as a way to really focus his mind and to block out the kind of heckling and the jeering he would often get from opposition fans and help him really focus on his game on the basketball court. Has anybody, if we've got thumbs up here, who watches or has watched The Masked Singer? Who's heard of that? Few thumbs up there. For those of you in outside of the UK, I know this is on in like Australia and America, but it might not be something that's familiar to some people. So this is a show where celebrities dress up in very wacky, fancy dress costumes and they sing. And the idea is that people have to try and guess who it is. The reason that I've included it here is that a lot of the people that take part in that show, even if they are not sort of singers by trade, talk about how much more kind of liberating and confident it feels to kind of perform whilst they're kind of sheltered and cocooned in that character that they're taking on. So again, a kind of persona there. And then finally, my favourite, who would think that the very kind of suave Cary Grant would need to do anything? But he said, I pretended to be somebody I wanted to be until finally I became that person or he became me. So this is all good and well, but what does this have to do, I guess, with being a BA? So thinking back to those scenarios that we looked at when we did our little game of Have You Ever right at the beginning, we will often, despite preparation, find ourselves in situations that we can't plan for. And actually, kind of having a persona that we can step into in those moments, somebody that can really embody the personality traits that we need in those situations can be really powerful. So how do we go about creating a persona? So the thing that I would say is they don't have to be these kind of wacky out there characters. There should really be kind of a grain of truth in there. It should be something that you can kind of reflect on back to yourself, that you can connect with. And the starting point really is to think about, well, if you were to kind of have this alter ego, what are the strengths you would want them to have? So using that strengths inventory exercise is really, really useful here because it already kind of calls out some of those things that you perhaps feel that you want to be better at. You can also think about how you want other people to feel about this persona. Think of them as a real individual. Like, what is the impact you would want this person to have when they are in a room or when they leave a room? What would you want people to say about them afterwards? You can also think about some of the physical elements. So, how would they speak? How would they move that perhaps might be a little bit different to yourself? And then finally, you can, if I can find the thing to move the slide on, you can go the whole hog and you can create a biography, you can get really creative and put together a real backstory for your persona. One of the other things when I was reading around personas and alter egos that it was recommended was to have some sort of physical artifact or totem or talisman, whatever word you want to use, to help you to connect with that persona. And that could be a piece of clothing, it could be an item of jewelry, or maybe even an accessory. One of the stories I read, I haven't completely fact checked it, but was that Martin Luther King didn't actually need to wear glasses, that he wore them because he just wanted to kind of feel, like he looked educated and he wanted to make sure that people would take him very seriously. And that was kind of what that was his kind of little talisman, if you like. And it's probably a good point to share mine with you. So what you might have noticed on the screen throughout the various different slides is a little picture of a Lego figure. So that is actually my little totem. I don't know if you'll be able to see it. She's there. That is my mini Helen, and she sits in my pocket. She comes with me to difficult meetings. She comes with me to scary presentations online and webinars. And she is my reminder of my persona, um, who is excellent at public speaking, brilliant at networking and meeting new people, very unflappable, very calm, um, always positive. And so all of those things that I really am striving to be, that's what my persona is all about. And so this is that final part of that statement. Behaviours can be sought. We talked about identifying our strengths. We talked about actually sort of setting the activities that might help us kind of teach ourselves some of those strengths and behaviours. The final step in the journey then is actually committing and actually, carrying out those activities. And it's that step, it's that bit that we're really talking about when we say that behaviours can be sought. So there are three key things that I hope you will take away. So I just want to kind of recap as a bit of a final summary. So firstly, um, personal skills, and I don't call them soft skills because I don't particularly like the term, but personal skills or human skills are incredibly important, particularly in the BA role, but in other roles as well. They are absolutely something that we should focus on in the same way that we focus on, tools and techniques and all of that sort of stuff. So do find time to incorporate that into your personal development. Secondly is learn through doing. You have to sort of be proactive and very consciously carve out opportunities for yourself to practice these skills. So, give some thought to that. There's opportunities in lots of what we do in our daily lives, I think, to practice these skills. It's just about being conscious about doing that. And then finally, practice takes time, doesn't it? It takes time to develop these things. And there are always going to be those moments where we perhaps just need to be prepared to step into the unknown. And I guess to kind of paraphrase what Cary Grant said, to just pretend to be the person we want to be and absolutely trust that we will become them. And that's it for me for the presentation. I'm going to hand back to Adrian now and hope that there are still some people there at the end of the call.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, I can confirm, Helen, there are definitely still a lot of people here at the end of the presentation, and I can see lots of virtual round of applauses coming up on the emojis. For those of you attending live, I did a few comments up, put a link to Helen's LinkedIn. Do connect. It's always a great way of showing the speaker that you've really appreciated what they've done as well, although you're doing that with all those emojis as well, which is just awesome. I'm going to rattle through as many questions as I can in the time that we have left. Um, if you are attending live, do stay till the very end if you can, because I'll let you know about the next webinar that's coming up at the very end as well. So, Helen, first question is from Robert, who asks, is there an origin story for you shaping this content, like a single aha moment or a pattern of observations that you had?
Do you know what? I had changed jobs. I had moved into a different government department, and I just felt a little bit. I felt a bit all at sea, as we often do in these things. I think the change had kind of made me reflect on sort of what some of the triggers were for my lack of confidence. I was kind of finding myself experiencing challenges again, and so I did some coaching, and the aha moment for me was really that it's actually it's I think we can tend to think it's a bit self-indulgent to spend time focusing on ourselves as opposed to like going and learning a thing. And actually that aha moment for me was that that's really important and that I got a massive
Mm.
amount out of focusing on myself and trying to sort of understand what it was that was making me tick and what I was struggling with.
Fantastic, fantastic. Um, a couple of quick questions here. So Corin asks, did you take the VIA strength survey to support your self-assessment of your strengths?
I have done that. They do have an online survey, you're quite correct. Um, but I wanted to do some stuff for myself as well and dig into that. So I focused more on using my own inventory, slightly less scientific maybe, but something that I felt I could connect with that little bit more.
Gives it the personal touch, doesn't it? A sort of adapting a tool. And excellent. Michelle asks, were there any areas that you simply didn't want to put effort into developing?
Do you know, I think one of the things that I set for myself, and it's kind of harks back to a little conversation we had before this call started, was to learn some different te tools and things like technology wise. And you know what? When it came to it, I just was like, I don't know how many different bits of kit that I really want to get used to knowing. Actually, the basics serve me quite well. I'm okay with that. And I kind of felt I was filling my brain with more stuff than it needed. So yeah, that.
So you edit it down to the real core
Yeah.
focus, which is important to
Well,
do,
yeah.
isn't it?
Trying to learn a new kind of way of using Miro every week or every month was just more than I could probably retain within my brain at this point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Excellent. Lee says that Lee says, I'm noticing and loving the Lego character images. How are we getting hold of them? They're great. And I know you mentioned there's a site that they came from, so I thought you could perhaps mention that.
Yeah. So I ordered mine from a wonderful little site called Minifigs Me. And one of the things that I did actually at the conference was I had a whole box of Lego. So it's the bit that you guys don't get to take advantage of on the virtual version, but I actually invited people to make their own Lego figure. So you can bulk buy many Lego parts. My husband is currently sick and tired of all of the different bits of Lego that get delivered to our house on a regular basis, so that I've got constantly got stock for these things. But yeah.
Fantastic. Could you just say that website again in case anyone didn't catch it the first time, Helen?
Yeah, minifigs, so minifigs, and I think it's minifigsme.co.uk, something like that.
Fantastic. So our next question comes from Lisa. And Lisa says, Helen, did you find that you needed to confide in someone to help to keep yourself honest? And Lisa adds, I feel that I might need to be held accountable by someone if I were to do this exercise. So did you have like an accountability buddy, as they're sometimes called?
Massively. I think that's a really great question. The thing that I did was to put it on LinkedIn. I thought, you know what?
Yeah,
Put it on there, then that's it, isn't it? Like if I've said, so I put like the character passport on there. I said, this is what I'm doing this year. These are the things that I'm going to do. And so I kind of felt like, yeah, I've got to do this now because somebody somewhere might go, yeah, Helen, what's that thing that you were going on about? So yeah, but talking to other people, sharing that with other people. And to be honest, a big part of actually doing the conference was that it absolutely kept me focused on that throughout my year. It was the biggest group accountability I've ever had, is like all these people that I had to kind of share this journey with.
fantastic. We've got time for one more quick question. So apologies if we don't get to a question. I do apologise, but there've been quite a few. But Rushma asks that behaviour reads, but I think that's probably a typo. I think perhaps behaviour breeds behaviour. Rushma. I think maybe that's. But if I've misinterpreted you, let me know in the chat. But behaviour breeds behaviour. Is that the same as behaviour being caught?
Yeah, very, very much. It's about if we are visible in the ways that we're behaving, it's kind of just shining a light on that for other people. It's kind of showing them the way, and setting that example for people. So yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. Well, excellent. Well, we are pretty much up against the clock, as is always the case with these webinars. I'm sure there are many, many more questions that people would have for you if you had more time. We've got so many wonderful applauses coming in on the emojis. Helen, if people want to connect with you, if they want to know more about what you do, if they want to stay in touch, what's the best way for people to connect?
I have definitely moved from being a LinkedIn lurker to someone that's actually quite active on LinkedIn. So definitely, yeah, feel free to connect with me on there. That's definitely the best place to get hold of me, and I'm always happy to have a conversation with people on there. So.
Fantastic. Well, Helen, this is the second time I've seen this presentation, and I've got, I think, even more from it the second time than I did the first time, which is a testament to how much content there is there. So thank you very much for sharing your knowledge and for being so, I don't know if it's the right word, but vulnerable and actually talking about your experience and how you've used it. That for me really, really added to it. And looking at the chat, that honesty I think has been really appreciated by the audience as well. So for those of you who are live, just before you go, in case you aren't aware of it, and I really, really hope you are, but just in case you're not aware of it, there is a quarterly magazine called BA Digest. And the Q1 edition, and the way you get to this is the short link is badigest.link. So you just go to badigest.link, or you can get it on our website, blackmetric.com, and you go to resources, BA Digest. And it is a free quarterly PDF magazine. The reason I'm mentioning it is the Q1 edition came out today. So literally, if you go there, you can just read current edition Q1, and then you can either download it or read it online. And if you read it online, it comes as a kind of PDF flipbook, and there's loads of really interesting stuff in there. So if you are into webinars like this, you will almost certainly be into BA Digest. So do take a look at that as well. I'm sure you'll find it interesting. And the final thing for me to mention is that our next webinar will be on the 13th of February at 6:30 p.m. UK time. That's GMT. I know a number of you are in different time zones. The only time zone I know off by heart that will be is Eastern time. It'll be 1:30 p.m. Eastern, I think, but same time as this webinar anyway. And that is on Beyond the Business Case, Strategic Project Analysis with Dr. Alexa Naliwick. And she's just written a book on this topic, and it talks about how sometimes, as well as a CBA, you need to take into account some of the qualitative factors of a change. That's not all about the CBA. And let's face it, we've probably all seen some CBAs and business cases that are complete works of fiction. So it's always good to get more insight into how we can make business cases better. If you want to register for that, it is free. There is the link on that as well. However, we are now at 1:30, so I do want to respect everyone's time. Thank you so much, Helen, for presenting such a wonderful, inspiring presentation. And thank you massively also to everyone who has attended live. So do connect on LinkedIn, enjoy, and see you next time. So bye for now. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Helen.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks for listening.